Hey, I'm Keira. You won't believe what happened at my family dinner. My parents looked me in the eyes and screamed, "You're nothing to us!" They kicked me out, stripped me of everything. But you know what? That wasn't the worst part. The truth behind it all, what they did to me, will make your blood boil. I thought I knew my family, but I had no idea just how deep the lies went. Hook 2. I was tossed out like trash, but they didn't just want to hurt me. They had been plotting against me for years, taking everything I had, from my inheritance to my home. They thought they could control me, but they were wrong. You won't believe the shocking twist that changed everything. Stay tuned. The holiday season had always been a mixed bag for me. On the one hand, it meant family, traditions, and the occasional fleeting moment of warmth. On the other hand, it was a constant reminder of my place in the family, a position that was never truly mine, always lingering on the outskirts of their world. The house was decorated with the same festive lights, and the scent of roast turkey filled the air as I entered the living room, my fingers nervously clutching the handle of the grocery bags. I had spent hours in the kitchen, preparing everything myself, just like I always did. I knew this dinner would unfold the same way as all the others had before. The house felt like a familiar cage, one that I had spent years trying to fit into. Miss Lauren, my mother, would sit at the head of the table, her eyes sharp, her presence cold. Mr. Lauren, my father, would silently observe, his power in the family lying in his passive control. Then there was my younger brother, Mr. Lauren Jr., whose entitlement mirrored our father's. Each of them played their roles in a script that had been written long before I had any say in the matter. It was like a performance, and I was always the understudy. As I entered the room, a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes was the only greeting I received. The pleasantries were exchanged. How was work? How's life? The usual small talk that felt as dry as the turkey on the table. The only noise came from the clinking of silverware and the soft hum of the refrigerator in the background. It was so painfully familiar that it almost felt comforting, but deep down, I knew this dinner wasn't going to be like the others. Not this time. I watched as my mother meticulously arranged the plates, her movements stiff and controlled. She always had a way of making everything feel like an obligation. Mr. Lauren Jr. took his seat without saying a word, his eyes glued to his phone as if anything happening in the real world wasn't worth his attention. My father, of course, said nothing, but his silence was as loud as any accusation. We sat at the table, the same way we always had, but the air was different now, charged with something I couldn't put my finger on. I felt it as I set down my glass, my heart pounding in my chest. Something was coming, and I wasn't prepared for it. The dinner continued with the usual disinterest, the same tired questions being asked as if they were nothing more than formalities. But then, as I began to clear the table, my mother's voice sliced through the air, cold and final. "From today, consider yourself a stranger. Don't come back." I froze. The words hung in the air, each one more cutting than the last. My throat tightened as I struggled to form a response, but nothing came out. The shock hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the breath from my lungs. I stood there, motionless, staring at the locked door, the key I had carried for so many years suddenly useless in my hand. A bitter laugh rose from somewhere deep within me, but I swallowed it down. There was no room for that kind of release. Not here, not now. I didn't know how long I stood there, my hand trembling as it gripped the key. It felt like hours, but in reality, it was only a few moments. In those moments, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Betrayal, anger, confusion. How had I ended up here? How had I become the one cast aside? I had always been the one to try, to hold it all together. And yet, in the end, it wasn't enough. My mind was spinning. I pressed my forehead against the door, feeling the coolness of the wood against my skin, as if it could ground me, bring me back to reality. But reality was slipping through my fingers. The family I had fought so hard to belong to had just made it clear that I never would. The next morning, the email came. The subject line read, "Urgent, we need to talk." It was from Mr. James, the family lawyer. My heart sank as I clicked on it, unsure of what to expect. The message was short, but it felt like a punch in the chest. "We have a problem. Call me immediately. A wave of frustration swept over me. I didn't want to deal with them anymore. Not after what had happened. But curiosity gnawed at me, and I found myself dialing his number before I could stop myself. Keira, Mr. James answered on the first ring, his voice steady but laced with urgency. I don't know how to say this, but we need your signature on something. It's important. I felt my pulse quicken. Important? After everything? After the way they had treated me? Why would I help you after what happened? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I understand your frustration, he said, his tone sympathetic but firm. But this is about the trust. We need you to sign. Without it, we're in serious trouble. The words didn't register at first. I stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, my mind reeling. Trust. My name was on a trust. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. This wasn't about me at all. It wasn't about family or love. It was about money. They needed me, not for who I was, but for what I could give them. The trust, the wealth. They couldn't afford to lose me, financially at least. My emotions swirled within me, anger, betrayal, empowerment. I had always been the one to give, to sacrifice, to hold things together. But now, it seemed I was the one with the power. They had tossed me aside emotionally, but now I held the keys to their empire. The lawyer's voice pulled me back to the present. Keira, we need your signature. This is your family's future we're talking about. I paused, staring at the phone in my hand. My mind was in turmoil, torn between spite and the temptation to take control of this situation. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to let them use me anymore, not for their gain. I'll think about it, I said, the words coming out colder than I intended. I'll call you back. As I hung up, the weight of everything I had just learned settled on my shoulders. They needed me. They had always needed me, but never for who I truly was. It had always been about what I could do for them. But now I held the power. I could choose. I could finally decide how this story ended. But at what cost? The morning after the dinner was a blur. I had barely slept, the events from the night before still haunting my every thought. It wasn't just the words my mother had thrown at me. It was the finality of it all. I couldn't shake the image of her cold, calculated face as she said I was a stranger to her now. A part of me wanted to scream, but all that came out was silence, just like the empty space she'd left in my life. I stood in my apartment, trying to gather myself. The scent of coffee filled the room, but it couldn't soothe the gnawing emptiness inside me. I moved around aimlessly, folding the laundry that had been sitting on the couch for days, taking the occasional sip of coffee, hoping the caffeine would kickstart something in me. But nothing happened. My mind raced, jumping from one thought to the next. Anger, confusion, but also something else. Relief. A strange kind of peace washed over me. No more pretending, no more trying to please them. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was suffocating under their expectations. But that feeling was fleeting, replaced by a deeper question. Where did I go from here? I glanced at the clock. It was mid-morning, and the world outside my apartment continued on, unaware of the storm brewing within me. I hadn't even realized how much time had passed until I checked my phone and saw an email notification. The name on the subject line sent a jolt through my chest. Mr. James, the family lawyer. What now? The email was short, but it hit like a ton of bricks. Urgent, immediate action required. The tone was cold, and the words felt sterile, like they had been written without a second thought. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to close the email and move on. But the curiosity gnawed at me. What more could they possibly want from me after everything that had happened? I hesitated for a long moment, fingers hovering over the screen. Then, reluctantly, I opened the message. Keira, the email began, we have an urgent matter regarding your parents' estate. It requires your signature. Without it, they risk losing control of a significant portion of their wealth. Please contact me as soon as possible. My stomach twisted. I should have expected this. After all, they had always been about control. And now, here they were, reaching out to me for help. Not because they cared, but because they needed me. I could almost hear my mother's voice echoing in my mind. From today, consider yourself a stranger. I slammed my phone down on the table, my mind spinning. It was as if everything had been laid out in front of me, every piece falling into place. The reason they had rejected me wasn't just because they didn't want me in their lives. It was because they couldn't afford to cut me out, not when it came to money. The anger inside me flared up, but it was quickly replaced by something stronger: power. I was holding the key to their empire now. They had always seen me as nothing more than a pawn, but now I was the one with the control. I could decide whether to help them or destroy them. But what did I want? I picked up the phone, dialing Mr. James's number. My heart pounded as it rang, and I found myself taking deep breaths to calm down. When he answered, his voice was professional, detached. "Keira, thank you for calling. I'll get straight to the point. Your parents' financial situation is critical, and your signature is needed on the trust documents. Without it, they will lose everything." The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. It was like they were using me once again, but now the tables had turned. I wasn't the helpless daughter anymore. I wasn't the one pleading for acceptance. I was the one they needed. I didn't let on how deeply this revelation affected me. I listened, carefully choosing my words. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice flat, betraying nothing of the turmoil inside. Mr. James's response was quick, professional, as expected. "Take your time, but this is an urgent matter, Keira. I trust you understand the gravity of the situation." I hung up, the silence in my apartment deafening. I stared at the phone for a long moment, the weight of the decision bearing down on me. I had been cast aside, forgotten, and now they were coming back to me. Not because they loved me, but because they needed me to fix their mess. They were desperate, and I held the power to make them suffer. I had always been the one to hold everything together, always trying to keep the peace, even when I felt like I was suffocating. Now, I had the chance to turn the tables. The thought of refusing them entirely crossed my mind, but something held me back. The idea of walking away from everything, of severing ties completely, was tempting. But the truth was, I wasn't ready to let them go. Not yet. I sat on the couch, staring out the window, the weight of my decision settling in. They thought they could throw me away, but they forgot one thing. I still held all the cards. I was no longer the one in need. Now they were. I woke up the next morning in a guest room at a friend's house, the sunlight streaming through the curtains doing little to brighten my mood. My body felt drained, but my mind was in overdrive. I hadn't slept much, if at all. Every moment since the dinner with my family replayed in my head like a never-ending loop. The words my mother had thrown at me still stung, but there was something else too, a feeling I hadn't expected. Relief. I laid there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, letting the silence fill the room. The quiet was a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before. I could hear the faint hum of a car passing by outside, but other than that, there was nothing. I couldn't remember the last time I felt this lost, and yet there was a part of me that felt lighter. I wasn't tied to them anymore. The shackles had been cut, but even that small shred of relief quickly turned into something else. Anger. The realization that they had used me for so long. My parents, always the selfish ones, had pushed me aside when I no longer fit into their picture-perfect world. Now, they wanted something from me. They wanted my signature, my compliance, so they could continue to control their empire, all while treating me like an afterthought. The betrayal felt like a slap in the face, but even worse, it was the realization that I had allowed it to happen for so long. I stood up, my feet hitting the cold hardwood floor, and walked to the small kitchen. The sound of the coffee machine brewing was the only thing that seemed to make sense in the moment. I needed to think. But how could I think when all my thoughts were clouded with resentment? Resentment for the years I had spent bending over backward for a family that never appreciated me. As I poured the hot coffee into my mug, the weight of the situation really started to hit me. The pain from last night had left a mark, but it was the realization that my parents had only ever wanted me around when they needed something that was gnawing at my insides. They never cared. They had always used me, just like they had used everything I did for them, the sacrifices, the emotional labor. And now they were using me again, only this time it was for something much bigger: money. I opened my phone to check my email. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but there it was. The email from Mr. James, the family lawyer, sitting in my inbox. The subject line read, "Urgent, immediate action required." I paused, staring at the screen, my heart sinking. What more could they possibly want from me? They had already discarded me like an old coat, and now they were back, knocking on my door, asking for my help. I had half a mind to delete the email without reading it, to pretend I never saw it, but curiosity got the better of me. I tapped the screen, the message loading in an instant. "Keira," it began, "we have an urgent matter regarding your parents' estate. It requires your signature. Without it, they risk losing control over a significant portion of their wealth. Please contact me as soon as possible." I read the words again, the weight of them hitting me harder than I had expected. My parents had rejected me, cast me aside, but now, they needed me to sign papers to keep their wealth intact. The cruelty of it all struck me like a thunderbolt. The reason they had pushed me out of their lives was so simple. I wasn't needed until I could help them hold on to what they had built off of my hard work and sacrifice. Anger boiled inside me. How dare they? How dare they come crawling back to me now, asking for my help when they had made it so clear they didn't want me around? I sat back down on the couch, the phone still in my hands. Part of me wanted to ignore them, to walk away and never look back. But another part of me, the part that had been silenced for so long, started to speak up. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had something they wanted. I held the cards now. I stared at the screen, debating my next move. Do I give in to their demands? Do I let them use me again? Or do I take control? For once, do I use their desperation against them? I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. James. It rang for what felt like an eternity before he answered. "Keira." His voice was cool, almost mechanical. "Thank you for calling. I'll get straight to the point. Your parents' financial situation is critical. Your signature is needed for the trust documents. Without it, they will lose everything." I felt the blood drain from my face. Everything. It was as if the weight of their empire was being placed squarely on my shoulders. I was the last piece of the puzzle. They couldn't have what they wanted without me. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice steady, but I could feel the storm brewing inside me. "I understand," Mr. James replied, the professionalism in his tone never wavering. "Take your time, but know that the matter is urgent." I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a moment, processing the information. The emotional weight was crushing, but there was also something else, something that made me feel powerful for the first time in years. I wasn't their pawn anymore. I had the power now. But what was I going to do with it? I thought about everything I had uncovered, the years of sacrifice, the emotional toll they had taken on me, and the way they had used me. They had always taken me for granted, as if I was just another piece of their machine. Now they were desperate, and I held the key to their future. The phone buzzed in my hand, breaking me from my thoughts. It was a message from my brother, Ryan. He was coming over. I didn't know what to expect, but I wasn't ready for him. The night of the family dinner arrived, and I stood outside my childhood home, staring at the large, familiar front door. The house loomed before me like a fortress, cold, imposing, a reminder of everything I had been forced to endure for years. The invitation from my parents had been clear, but it still didn't sit well with me. I was to confront the past, to face them, to put everything on the table. But what if it didn't go the way I thought? What if the confrontation pushed me further away from what little family I had left? I took a deep breath and glanced at the thick envelope in my hand, the letter I had sent. It felt like a different lifetime now, a lifetime where I wasn't seen, never truly valued, always a pawn in their game. But tonight, the game had changed. I wasn't the quiet, obedient daughter anymore. The door swung open before I could knock. I stepped inside. The house smelled the same: wood, polished furniture, a hint of cologne from my father's old coat. The soft murmur of voices greeted me, but the moment I stepped in, the warmth of home vanished. My parents sat at the dinner table, pretending like nothing had happened, nothing had changed. The servants moved around the table, filling glasses and placing dishes, the clinking of silverware in the background. The atmosphere was thick, like everyone was waiting for the storm to break. "Keira, you're here," my mother said, her voice as cold as ever. There was no warmth, no sign of anything resembling affection. She simply gestured to the seat next to her. I sat down, my palms clammy, my heart racing. My parents made small talk, asking about work, my life outside their reach. It was all meaningless chatter, the kind of conversation that had always left me feeling like an outsider in my own family. I barely listened to their words. I couldn't. My mind was elsewhere, preparing for what was coming next. The tension in the room was palpable. My mother's gaze flickered toward my father as if silently communicating the usual routine. Keep things formal, don't let the cracks show. But I had seen the cracks, felt them every day, and I wasn't willing to let this night pass without addressing them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I broke the silence. I sent a letter, I said, my voice calm but firm. You know why I'm here. My mother's lips tightened, her eyes narrowing as if trying to will me back into the obedient daughter she had always wanted. Keira, we've been through this. You're always making things dramatic. Why can't you just let things go? Her words hit me like a slap. Let things go? You want me to let go of everything? The years of manipulation? The times you only came to me when you needed something? I wasn't shouting, but there was fire in my voice. A fire that had been smoldering for years. My father, silent as always, didn't meet my eyes. Instead, he pushed his food around his plate, avoiding the confrontation I knew was inevitable. I turned to him. You don't get to stay silent anymore. I'm done playing the part of your invisible daughter. All those years, I was nothing but a tool to make your life easier, to give you everything you wanted while you ignored me. I was never enough, never good enough for your standards. My mother let out an exasperated sigh. We did everything for you. For your future, Keira. You don't understand. We were giving you everything you needed. Everything I needed. The words felt hollow, coming from her. I stared at her, my anger rising. No, you didn't give me anything. You took from me. Every piece of me was used. Every sacrifice I made was for your empire, your status. And when I finally broke, when I had nothing left to give, you threw me away. And now, when you need me again, when you need my signature, you think I'll just step back into your game. No. The room fell into silence. My father finally looked up from his plate, his face hardening, and for the first time he spoke. You've betrayed us, he spat, his voice cold. Everything we did, everything we built was for you. You have no gratitude, Keira. You've always been ungrateful. I leaned forward, not caring that my voice was rising now. Ungrateful? You're the one who's ungrateful. You never saw me for who I was. You never cared about me. I wasn't a daughter to you. I was a pawn, a means to an end, and you don't get to call me ungrateful. Not anymore. The words were out before I could stop them, and as I said them, I felt something shift in the air. The anger I had held for so long was no longer just a flame. It was a blaze, and it wasn't just in me. I could see it in my father's face, the way his jaw clenched. He didn't know how to handle me now. Before he could say anything, Ryan, my younger brother, stood up. He had been sitting silently beside my mother, watching the exchange unfold. But now, he was on his feet, his face flushed with emotion. Stop, he said, his voice trembling slightly. Just stop. All eyes turned to him, and for a moment, I thought I might be imagining things. Ryan, the golden child, the one who had always been their favorite, the one who could do no wrong, was standing up for me. I've known, Ryan said, his voice shaking with emotion. I've known for years. The way they treated you, Keira. The way they used you. I just didn't know how to say it. I didn't stand up for you, and I'm sorry for that. I should have been there. The room was still. My mother's eyes went wide, and my father's expression softened for the first time in what felt like forever. They were stunned, speechless. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was shocked, but another part of me felt a strange sense of relief. Ryan, the person I thought I could never count on, was finally saying what I had always wanted to hear. Thank you, I whispered, my voice cracking. Ryan nodded, but it didn't last long. My parents' silence spoke volumes. Then, my father finally spoke, his voice cold, sharp. Fine, he said. If that's how you feel, Keira, then you leave. But know this, you're done. We'll cut you off completely. You'll have nothing. His words were like a slap to the face, but they didn't sting like they used to. They didn't hurt as much as they once would have. Instead, they felt like freedom. I looked at my parents, at the life they wanted me to return to, the life I had fought so hard to escape. I'm done, I said, my voice steady. I won't sign the papers. I'm not a part of your game anymore. I stood up to leave, but before I could reach the door, my mother's voice rang out. You'll regret this, she said, her tone filled with venom. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I had made my decision. The morning after the dinner confrontation felt strange. The sunlight filtering through my apartment window was warmer than I expected, yet it didn't offer any comfort. I sat on the edge of my bed, my body physically exhausted from the emotional toll the night had taken. It had been a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and finally, the liberation I had craved for so long. But as the quiet of the morning crept in, so did the doubt. Was I sure? Had I done the right thing by severing ties? The weight of it pressed on me, and for a moment, I wanted to turn back, to undo everything that had transpired. But then, I remembered the letter, the harsh words I had spoken. I wasn't going to be that person anymore, the one who stood quietly in the background, always just out of reach of their love. No, I had taken control of my life, but control had its price, and that price was starting to show. My phone buzzed on the table, dragging me out of my thoughts. I hesitated before picking it up, not wanting to face the reality of what had just happened. But when I saw the multiple missed calls and the string of text messages from my mother, my stomach dropped. The first voicemail was from my mother, her voice tight with fury. You've ruined this family, Keira. You've made your choice. There's no going back now. She sounded so cold, so certain of her righteousness. And then there was the second message, this time from my father, his tone entirely businesslike. Think about what you're doing. You've made a mistake. Reconsider. I felt my fingers tighten around the phone. Anger surged in my chest, but there was something else too, a strange sense of relief. They were still trying to manipulate me, trying to get me to cave in, but this time, I wasn't backing down. I set the phone down, breathing in deeply, my emotions swirling. I'd chosen my path. I'd made my decision. But the weight of it, the reality of their control, still felt overwhelming. They weren't just letting me go, they were punishing me. I let out a slow breath, then stood up. My mind was racing. I was free, yes, but at what cost? Then, my phone buzzed again. It was a letter from my father's lawyer. I opened it, the words on the page nearly knocking the breath from my lungs. Your inheritance is being contested, it read. The family estate will be redistributed. Your share will be revoked unless you sign the necessary documents. I sat down heavily, my mind spinning. I had known they would retaliate, but not like this. They had nothing left to hold over me, except money. They were trying to strip me of my inheritance, to punish me for walking away. The weight of it sank deep into my chest. I could feel the sting of betrayal, but more than that, I felt the cold truth of it. They never cared about me. They had always cared about what I could give them. But I was done. I had made my choice. I stared at the letter, my mind still reeling. This was the price of freedom. It was coming at a high cost, but I wasn't going to back down. I could feel my resolve hardening. It wasn't just about the money, it was about them controlling my life. And that was something I couldn't tolerate anymore. I didn't know how to fix this, but I knew I wasn't going to roll over. I grabbed my phone, and after a few moments of hesitation, dialed Ryan's number. I needed to talk to him. Despite everything, I didn't want to face this alone. Ryan picked up on the second ring. Keira? He asked, his voice softer than I had expected. I need to talk to you, I said, my voice steady, but with an edge of vulnerability I couldn't hide. I'll be over in a bit, he replied, and just like that, the connection we had been lacking for so long felt a little bit stronger. When Ryan arrived, I could tell something was different about him. He wasn't his usual self, the golden boy, the one who always did everything right. Now he looked like someone who had been carrying a weight of his own. "I've been thinking a lot," he started, sitting down on the couch next to me. "About everything. About what happened last night." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I've always known how they treated you. I just didn't know how to stand up for you." I stared at him, shocked. Ryan, the one who had always been their favorite, the one who had always been protected from the harshness of their expectations, was admitting that he saw it all. And now, he regretted not doing something about it sooner. "I'm sorry, Keira," he said quietly, his eyes filled with regret. "I should have been there for you. I should have seen it." I didn't know what to say. I had always felt like an outsider, but to hear him admit this, to finally acknowledge the truth, it felt like a small victory. "You're here now," I said, my voice catching. "That's what matters." Ryan nodded, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. He was torn. I knew that. Our parents had played us against each other for years, and now he was stuck in the middle, trying to find a way out. "I don't know what to do," he confessed. "I don't know what the right thing is." "You're not alone," I replied. "We can do this together." The next morning, I gathered everything I could find: documents, emails, evidence that would prove everything I had been saying all these years. I was preparing for the final confrontation, the one that would change everything. I wasn't going to stand by any longer. I was going to confront them, and this time, I would have the evidence to back up every word. Ryan was going to stand by me, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were on the same side. I couldn't go back. Not now. By the time I was ready to face my parents, my phone buzzed again. This time, an unexpected call. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but the words it spoke would change everything. "Keira, I have information. Information that could change everything about your family's financial situation." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. What the hell was going on? The sun was barely up when I sat by the window, staring out over the city. The quiet hum of the early morning was the only sound filling my apartment. My heart still ached from the confrontation the night before. The taste of victory had been bitter, and now, in the light of a new day, it felt more like a weight than freedom. I had taken a stand, yes, but with that came consequences I wasn't yet ready to face. I ran a hand through my hair, my mind racing over the words exchanged at that dinner. My parents had given me no choice but to make that decision, and yet the price was more than I had anticipated. I had lost everything that had once been familiar: my family, my place at their table, my inheritance. I was standing at the edge, looking down into a void of my own making. But I wasn't backing down. Not now. The fight had only just begun. I turned my attention back to the pile of papers scattered across the table. As I flipped through old files, something caught my eye, a document that seemed out of place. It was hidden in the back of a folder, tucked between innocuous papers about the family business. My hand froze as I pulled it out, the title of the document clearly visible: Family Wealth Distribution Agreement. The words on the page blurred for a moment as I scanned them. My heart hammered in my chest as I read further. The document outlined a plan that had been set in motion years ago, a plan that specifically excluded me from the family's wealth and inheritance. A secret contract that manipulated my name out of the family will. I sat back in my chair, my hands shaking as I processed the reality before me. They had been working to erase me from their legacy all along. It wasn't just a matter of my parents being cold or neglectful. No, this was a deliberate effort to exclude me, to take what was rightfully mine and leave me with nothing. Anger and betrayal surged through me. I had been nothing but a pawn in their game. My contributions, my sacrifices, they meant nothing. I had given everything for them, and they had been plotting my exclusion from the start. The weight of it was suffocating. I slammed the document down on the table, my mind whirling. How could they do this? How could they treat me this way? But as the anger began to subside, a new feeling emerged: empowerment. This was the truth I had been searching for. It wasn't just about money. It was about the years of manipulation, the lies they had spun to control me. I wasn't their pawn anymore. I had the power now, and I was going to use it. My phone rang, cutting through the silence of my apartment. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. And for a moment, I hesitated. But then, curiosity got the better of me, and I answered, "Keira?" The voice on the other end was low and tense. "I have information that could destroy your parents' plans." I sat up straighter, my pulse quickening. The voice was unfamiliar, but the urgency in it was clear. "They've been lying to you, manipulating everything. I know about the secret dealings. Your father's business empire is built on lies, and I have proof." My mind raced. Could this be the leverage I needed to finally confront them? To bring their empire down? "Who is this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rising tide of emotions. "Someone who knows everything. Someone who used to work for your father," the voice responded. "I can meet you, give you the documents, but you need to be careful. There's a lot at stake here." I felt a knot form in my stomach. I knew the risks, but this was it. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for. "Where and when?" I asked, my voice steady. "Tomorrow. I'll send you the details." The call ended, leaving me in stunned silence. My heart was pounding in my chest as I processed what had just happened. I had information, real evidence, that could finally expose my parents for what they were. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Who was this person? What did they want in return? Was I walking into a trap? Despite the risk, I knew I had no choice. I couldn't let this opportunity slip away. I was going to meet them, and I was going to get the truth, no matter what it cost. The next day, I met the informant in a quiet cafe, away from the watchful eyes of my family. The person who had called me was nothing like I had expected. Quiet, unassuming, but with eyes that betrayed the weight of the knowledge they carried. They slid a manila envelope across the table toward me. Inside, there were several documents, financial records, emails, and most shocking of all, proof that my father had been embezzling money from my own trust fund. My mind struggled to comprehend what I was seeing. The corruption ran deeper than I had ever imagined. My family wasn't just exploiting me, they had been exploiting everyone, including their employees, for years. I felt my stomach churn as I read through the documents, the weight of betrayal sinking in. This wasn't just about me. It was about a network of lies that spanned years, manipulating not only my life but countless others. My parents had been playing everyone for fools. This is everything," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. The informant nodded. "I've seen it all. I'm telling you, they're not who you think they are." I looked down at the papers in front of me, my hands shaking. The power to expose them was right here in front of me. It was mine for the taking. But as I felt the weight of it all, I knew this was just the beginning. The real battle was about to start. The next day, my phone buzzed with an ominous message from my father's lawyer. They were already retaliating. A team of lawyers was coming after me, demanding I return the documents. They wanted me to cease all actions against the family business, threatening legal action. But I wasn't scared. I'd already made my decision. They had no power over me anymore. As the days passed, I realized that I was no longer fighting in the shadows. I wasn't just standing up to my parents, I was taking my fight to the public. I reached out to a reporter I knew, one who had been investigating my father's company for months. Within days, the scandal broke wide open. The media was all over it. My parents' empire was crumbling, and I was at the center of it all. The attention was overwhelming. But for the first time in my life, I felt alive. I was no longer a victim. I was a force, ready to tear down the walls they had built around me. But of course, my father wasn't going to take this lying down. He launched a full-on smear campaign, trying to destroy my reputation in the press. He painted me as a gold digger, a liar, someone out to ruin the family. The rumors spread like wildfire. But I wasn't fazed. I knew what I was up against. They had underestimated me for too long. I took a step back, focused, and prepared for the next round. I had to outsmart them, and I would. Then, as I was preparing for the next stage of my public fight, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, my mother stood there, her face a mixture of guilt and desperation. "I'm here to make things right, Keira," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm ready to apologize. I want to end this feud." I stood frozen for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. Was this an olive branch or another trap? I stared at her, my voice cold and steady. Why are you really here, Mom? I stood by the window of my apartment, looking out at the busy city below. It had been weeks since the initial fallout with my family, and I'd been navigating the emotional storm since. The weight of my decision to break free from them was starting to settle in, heavier than I expected. Today, the storm was coming to a head. I knew that I had to face them one final time, and that this moment would define everything that followed. It wasn't just the prospect of money or family legacy anymore. It was about my own sense of identity, and the realization that I was ready to take control of my life, no matter the cost. But still, a small, insidious voice in the back of my mind asked, "What if you're wrong?" But I had come too far to turn back now. My resolve was stronger than the fear that gnawed at my insides. This was it. I had made my bed, and now I had to lie in it. Then my phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from my father. The words were short, cold, but there was something desperate about them. "Keira, we need to settle things privately before the media escalates this further. Meet me tomorrow." I stared at the text for a long moment, the weight of its meaning sinking in. It was the final act of desperation. Was this a genuine attempt to reconcile, or yet another ploy to manipulate me? I wasn't sure, but I couldn't ignore it. If they wanted a final showdown, I'd give them one. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. The next day, I met my father at a restaurant, a fancy place far from prying eyes. The kind of place where everything was meticulously orchestrated. The lighting, the silverware, the soft murmur of conversation. It was supposed to be a place of calm, but the air between us was thick with tension. He was already sitting at a table when I arrived, his face expressionless, his posture stiff. He stood when I approached, and we exchanged pleasantries. Nothing genuine, just formalities to keep up appearances. Once seated, he wasted no time. "I want to apologize," he began, his voice flat, his eyes scanning the menu as if he wasn't truly engaged in what was happening. "But the fact is, you've caused a lot of damage. I've come to offer you a solution." He paused, and then dropped the bomb. "I'll offer you a substantial sum if you walk away from this. You drop your legal case, stay out of the press, and let the family move on." I blinked, taken aback by the offer. My father was offering me money to stay quiet, to walk away from the truth, and let them carry on as if nothing ever happened. My emotions, still raw from everything that had transpired, flared up. Anger welled inside me. I let the words hang in the air for a moment before responding. "Is that really what you think of me, Dad? That I'll just take your money and stay silent? That I'll let you continue to control everything?" He leaned forward, his voice lowering as if to make it more intimate. "It's not about control, Keira. It's about protecting the family, keeping our legacy intact." I looked at him, seeing through the facade he was trying to project. I wasn't a bargaining chip. "You don't get it," I said, my voice growing steadier. "This isn't about money or legacy. It's about what you've done to me, to everyone around you. It's about the lies, the manipulation, the way you've used me as a pawn in your game." His face hardened. "You don't understand, Keira. Everything I've done has been for you, for this family. You're ungrateful. I built this empire, and you've chosen to tear it down." His words hit me like a slap, but they only solidified my resolve. This wasn't about protecting the family. It was about power, and I was done being a part of it. As the conversation escalated, my father did what he always did. He played the victim. "If you don't do this, Keira, you'll destroy everything. I'll make sure the public knows what you're doing to the family. The press will tear you apart, and your reputation will be ruined. You'll lose everything. You'll be left with nothing." The threat stung, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had already lost everything I thought I needed. I wasn't going back to that life. I looked him in the eyes, and with a voice as calm as I could muster, I said, "You've already taken everything from me. I have nothing left to lose. I'll never be part of your empire again." His face turned red with fury, but before he could say anything more, I stood up. "This ends now." Just as I turned to leave, I heard my father's voice behind me. "You'll regret this. You're making a huge mistake." I didn't turn around. I knew what I had to do. As I walked out of the restaurant, a feeling of finality washed over me. But just as I thought I was free, I received another shock. My father's lawyers were already working on ways to destroy me. They sent a team to intimidate me, to force me into submission. But it didn't scare me anymore. I had come too far. This time, I was ready for whatever came next. That's when my phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. "I'm on my way to meet you. We need to talk." I didn't need to see her to know what this was. The last attempt at manipulation. I sat still for a moment, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was coming, but one thing was certain. I wouldn't back down. I met her at my apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. She was calm, too calm. The words that followed would cut deeper than anything my father had said. "I'm here to make it right," she said. "I've been thinking about everything. I want to end this feud. I'm sorry for everything." I could barely hold back the anger. I looked at her, my voice steady but filled with disbelief. "Why are you really here, Mom?" She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the coldness in her eyes. "Because you need to understand that you're destroying us, Keira. The family is falling apart, and you're the reason why." I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart skipped a beat. But then, in the blink of an eye, she dropped the bombshell that would change everything. "By the way," she said, her voice low, "you were never your father's biological daughter. You were adopted. I think it's time you understood that." I stood frozen, my mind racing. The truth I thought I knew about my own life, my own identity, was all a lie. "Are you kidding me?" My voice was barely a whisper. The world around me seemed to spin, and I couldn't find solid ground. I looked at her in shock, disbelief settling like a weight in my chest. This was the final blow. My entire world had just been turned upside down. "Why are you telling me this now?" I managed to ask, my throat tight. "Because the truth is never what you think it is, Keira. You're not even a part of this family anymore. Never have been." I stood there, my mind reeling, unable to process the depth of the betrayal. I stood at the threshold of my childhood home, feeling the weight of what was to come settle in my chest. This was it, the final meeting, the final confrontation. Weeks had passed since the last time I faced my family, and each day that went by had only solidified my decision to bring the truth to light. Now, I had no choice but to see this through to the end. I'd fought so hard to get to this point, and there was no turning back. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for everything I'd lost. My emotions were a storm, fear, determination, and a sense of power that I'd never known before. I had the truth, I had the evidence, and most importantly, I had my will to fight. But a deep sense of dread lingered in the pit of my stomach, whispering that the worst was yet to come. As I stepped inside, the familiar scent of the house hit me. It was strangely comforting and suffocating at the same time. I walked into the living room where my father and mother were already seated, but what shocked me was the third figure at the table. My brother, Ryan. I froze. My estranged brother, who had been absent for years, now sat there like nothing had ever happened. My mind raced. Was he here to support me? Or was this just another one of their schemes? The tension in the room was palpable. I kept my face neutral, trying to gauge the situation. Ryan met my eyes, but I couldn't read him. I had to stay focused. The truth was coming, and I couldn't afford any distractions. Without wasting any more time, my father spoke first, his voice as cold and calculated as ever. "Keira, I've called you here today to end this madness. The media circus has gone on long enough. I want to settle this privately for the sake of the family. There's no need for any more public drama." I held my ground, staring at him. "Settle this?" I repeated, disbelief lacing my words. "After everything you've done, you want to settle this? You think we can just pretend none of this ever happened?" He leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "You've always had a dramatic flair, Keira, but we both know that the family's name and wealth are on the line. This can be fixed. You're still part of this family if you choose to be." I let out a bitter laugh, my anger bubbling to the surface. "Part of this family?" I scoffed. "You've already made it clear where I stand in your eyes. I'm just a pawn, a bargaining chip." He was quiet for a moment, the tension between us thickening. But then, his tone shifted, a sly smile creeping across his face. I'm offering you a chance to walk away, Keira. A generous sum, a future without the media, without the legal battles. You can be free of all this. All you have to do is walk away. The words stung. He was offering me money to silence me, to make everything go away. The hypocrisy was almost too much to bear. I don't need your money, I said, my voice cold. I never did. What I need is justice. At that, Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Keira, please think about this. You don't know what you're doing. You're tearing this family apart. I looked at him, feeling a mix of anger and confusion. You've been silent this whole time, Ryan, and now you want to lecture me about family? Where were you when they did all this to me? Ryan's face hardened, but there was a flicker of something. Guilt, maybe? He finally spoke, his voice low. I'm not proud of what they've done, Keira. I've been caught in the middle, but I've always been loyal to the family. I never wanted you to get hurt. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Loyal to the family? I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call this? This web of lies, manipulation, and betrayal? My father slammed his fist on the table, his patience running thin. Enough, Keira. You don't understand what's at stake. The legacy, the business, it's all I've worked for my entire life. And you're threatening to tear it all down. You're ruining us. I stood tall, the weight of his words pushing me to my breaking point. No, you're ruining us. All of us. You've lied, you've manipulated, and now you're trying to buy me off. Well, I won't stand for it anymore. Just then, Ryan surprised me. He stood up, his voice steady but filled with regret. Keira, I've been a part of this. I've helped cover up the lies. I believed in what we were doing. I thought it was the right thing. But now I see the damage. I see what it's cost you, and I'm sorry. My heart dropped. My brother, the one person I thought I could count on, was just as guilty as the rest. I felt the floor slip beneath me, betrayed, again. You're complicit in all of this? I whispered, more to myself than to him. You let them do this to me, and you stood by quietly? Ryan didn't answer. His silence spoke louder than any words could. My father wasn't finished. You think this ends here, Keira? If you don't comply, I will release everything. The media, the public, everyone will know the truth about you, your mother's health, the company's finances. Everything will be exposed. Do you really want to destroy us? But the threat only made me stronger. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was done being controlled. I'm not afraid of you anymore, I said. I'm not afraid of any of you. I turned my back on them, walking toward the door. I'm going to the authorities. I'm going to the press. You've done enough damage, but I'm putting an end to it. I could feel their eyes on my back as I left, but I didn't care. The battle had only just begun. And then, just as I reached the door, my phone rang. It was a journalist I'd been in touch with, someone I trusted. They want to publish it, Keira. The story. They're ready. The words hit me like a wave, and for the first time in my life, I felt the weight of the truth lifting from my shoulders. I wasn't carrying their secrets anymore. It was time for the world to see who they really were. The truth was no longer mine to protect. It was time for the world to know. I walked out of that room with my head high, my heart racing, but my mind clear. The truth is no longer mine to protect. It's time for the world to see who you really are and the consequences you'll face. I sat in my apartment, staring out the window, the city skyline stretching endlessly before me. It had been a week since I walked away from that final confrontation with my family, and the weight of it all was just beginning to sink in. I had fought for so long, faced betrayal and manipulation, and now, finally, I was free. But that freedom didn't come without a cost. The scars remained, deep and raw, reminders of the past that still clung to me. I had been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love me, the ones I trusted more than anyone else, and yet here I was, still standing. I didn't have all the answers, but I was learning to live without them. The pain of my family's rejection still stung, but each day I felt it less. I had made my peace with the fact that moving on didn't mean forgetting. There was still so much left to rebuild, but for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope for the future. Just as I was settling into my thoughts, the sudden buzz of my phone interrupted the stillness. It was a message from my former best friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Her name flashed on the screen, and I hesitated. I wasn't sure if I was ready to open that door again. The fallout from my family had driven wedges between me and many people I once cared about. Still, I couldn't deny the curiosity and the part of me that longed for some semblance of connection. "Keira, I've been thinking about you," her message read. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you when you needed me the most. I understand if you don't want to hear from me, but I hope we can talk sometime." I stared at the message for a while, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. She had always been my rock before everything fell apart, but when things got tough, she disappeared. I wasn't sure I could ever trust her again. But maybe people could change. Maybe we could rebuild something, even if it wasn't the same. I took a deep breath and typed a reply, my heart racing. "I'm open to talking. It's been a long time." A few moments passed before her response came. "I'm so glad. I'd really like to see you, Keira. Maybe we can grab coffee soon?" I set the phone down and let the silence settle over me. I had no idea what the future held, but this felt like a small step in the right direction. I wasn't alone in this world, and I didn't have to carry the weight of everything by myself anymore. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. I walked over to the door, opening it to find a messenger with an envelope. The letter inside was from my lawyer. As I read the contents, a smile tugged at my lips. "The authorities are moving forward with the investigation," it said. "The truth is coming to light." For the first time in weeks, I felt a surge of hope. Justice was on its way. My father's threats, his manipulation, none of it had worked. The truth was finally being exposed, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Just as I was letting the weight of that victory settle, my phone rang again. This time, it was my father. I sighed, bracing myself for whatever he was about to say. "Keira," his voice came through, laced with desperation. "I need you to stop the legal battle. We can still fix this. I'll make it right. The family. We can go back to how things were." I let his words wash over me, my resolve only growing stronger. "I'm done, Dad," I said firmly. "You had your chance to make things right. I'm not going to continue enabling this. I'm moving on, and you're not going to stop me." There was a silence on the other end of the line. I could feel his frustration, his desperation, but I no longer cared. This was my life now, and I wasn't going to let him control it any longer. He tried once more, but I hung up the phone, cutting off any further conversation. This was it. The final break. The decision had been made. The next day, I took another step forward. I met with my friends, the ones who had supported me from the start, and officially started my own business. No longer would I hide behind my family's name. I was creating my own path, and it felt freeing. I was no longer tied to the past, no longer tied to their wealth or their legacy. My future was mine to shape. But there was one final thing I needed to do. I drove to the house where I grew up, not to reconcile, not to return, but to close that chapter for good. I walked through the empty rooms, each one echoing with memories. The place that had once held so much power over me now felt small, insignificant. I walked out of the house, breathing in the fresh air, finally letting go. The past no longer had a hold on me. It was just a part of the story that had led me to this moment. Standing on the steps of the house, I looked out over the city. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over everything. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in my life, I felt ready. Ready to take it on. Ready to create my own future. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had taken control of my life. The past no longer defined me. "My future is mine to create," I whispered to myself, "and I will not be held back."